Hello everyone. In today's session, I am before you for discussion on structural approach of teaching English language. The different points that I am going to discuss today are what is structural approach of teaching English language, its definitions, procedure of teaching, types of structures, principles of selection of structures, gradation of structures, and the principles of structural approach and its advantages and disadvantages. So let's start with the meaning of structural approach. This approach is a direct outcome of the efforts and researches done by the British Council in Institute of Education, University of London, and many others. And the basis of this approach is that in learning a foreign language, mastery of structures is more important than the acquisition of vocabulary. And the structural approach means the arrangement of words in such a way as to form a suitable pattern of sentences. This approach is also known as new approach or oral approach. In India, Tamil Nadu is the first state to have this approach in vogue. And afterwards, the Central Institute of English, Hyderabad, played a leading role to popularize this approach in the rest of the country. The structural approach is based on the assumption that language teaching can best be done through systematic selection and grading of structures or sentence patterns. It was widely implemented in United States in 1950s. And the basic principles underlying the approach is that language is speech, not writing. It is important to design courses around selected and graded structures. So in short, we can say that structural approach of teaching English, it aims at teaching and practicing the basic structures of English. They are taught through drill and practice, and any type of method is useful in teaching the structures. That is why it is an approach, not a method. And this is the most effective approach of learning a language. Now, what are the structures? The meaning of structures? The different arrangement of patterns of words are called structures. If we learn a structure, any number of sentences of the same type can be constructed. Words are arranged in different orders to convey meaning according to the requirement of the situation. C.S. Bhandari, he says about structural approach. A structural approach is not a method, it is an approach, and any method can be used in it. Now, some examples of structures. He played cricket. We are using here subject, then verb and object. Second, was she a doctor? Here we are using first verb, then subject, then object. Is an interrogative sentence. At number 3, she doesn't like Chinese food. It is a negative sentence. We are using subject, verb, then not an object. And at number 4, it is an interrogative negative. Is your sister not a nurse? We are using verb, then subject and object. These are the different patterns of structures used in structural approach. Now the definitions. The first definition is given by Brungerton. According to Brungerton, structural approach is a scientific study of the fundamental structures of English language, their analysis and logical arrangement. Menon and Patel, the structural approach is based on the belief that in the learning of a foreign language, the mastery of structures is more important than the acquisition of vocabulary. So these are the definitions by Brimington and Menon and Patel. Now the procedures of teaching. In structural approach, every structure is taught separately by the teacher. And generally, the following steps are involved in the procedure. At first, in the classroom, the selected structures are presented orally. And it is always desirable to do much oral work in the early stages of learning. But reading and writing must not be ignored. Then the repetition drill, substitution drill, and completion drill, etc. are given to the students. The students acquire command on structures through repetition until they are able to use these structures in their own expression naturally. Now the types of structures. In the structural approach, there are 4 kinds of structures. First one is sentence patterns. So what is a sentence pattern? Sentence pattern is a model for sentence which is of the same shape and construction, although made up of different words. Means you can use the different words, but the shape and construction of the sentence will be the same. For example, she is going to school. Then the phrase patterns. Phrase is a word or a group of words which expresses an idea without its being a sentence of clause. It is not a complete sentence. It is only an expression of idea. For example, in the school, with a knife, on the desk, into the well, etc. These are the phrase patterns. Number next is formulas. Formulas are those words which are used on certain occasions. For example, when you say, how are you, thank you, excuse me, etc. Number 4, idioms. Idioms like born with a silver spoon at the 11th hour, might is right, all that glitter is not gold, etc. These come in this category of idioms. These types of idioms also form the structures. There are also the patterns of structures. Now the principles of selection of structures. How can we select proper structures for teaching students? Number 1 is principle of usefulness. It means that useful structure should be selected first. Some structures are more useful to the learner than the others, and the structures which are very common in use, they should be given preference in selection. And the sentence patterns with which we interact daily in the form of speech, reading, listening, and writing, they should be selected first. And the pattern which occur frequently, which we are using again and again, should be selected first. And which do not occur frequently, they should be selected later on. Next is principle of simplicity. Means the simple structure should be taken first. The structures which are simple and easy to learn should be selected first. For example, the structure like this is a book. It is a simple structure, both in form and meaning. But the structure, if you are taking another structure, like if you had walked fast, you would have caught the train. So this structure is obviously more difficult structure, which can be taken up at a later stage. Structures which are simple in form and meaning should be selected first. Number next, principle of teachability. It means the structures which are easy to teach in the classroom situation and with available resources within the classroom should be selected first. These structures should be easy to be drilled and practiced. For example, take a structure like I play football. I am reading a book. The book is on the table. These are the simple structures. These are teachable structures. You can show students football in the classroom. You can show them the books in the classroom. You can also show them the table. So these kind of structures are easy to teach with direct method of teaching with the available materials in the classroom. And therefore, easily teachable pattern should be taken up first and the difficult ones later. Principle of productivity. The sentence patterns which act as models and from which many more sentences are made should be selected first. Because one structure leading to other or helping in framing many other similar sentences and enhances knowledge of the language. So such structures, these are also called the productive structures. And these are also called basic structure patterns. So structure should provide for further building up of sentences. They should be productive in nature. And next, importance of students' activity than the activity of the teacher. The student's activity is more important than the activity of the teacher in the classroom. And importance of firmly fixed word order has to be learned systematically. Now the gradation of structures. Gradation of structures means providing or giving numbers to the selected structures, and these numbers represents the sequence of teaching of structures. We cannot teach all the structures at a time. These need to be graded first. If 300 structures are selected, then all the 300 structures cannot be taught at the same time. Some of them are to be taught first and other later. So this deciding of the beginning and end is called the gradation of structures. And the gradation can be done on the following principles. First one is principle of usefulness. It means the structures which are more in use should be graded with initial numbers. They should be given the preference. And these structures which are used in our day-to-day life activities are selected, graded, and taught at early stage. Then the principle of simplicity. The structures which are easy to teach in the classroom situation with direct method of teaching are given preference in teaching early. These structures should be simple in form and meaning, and it makes them easy to understand. It makes students easy to understand. The principle of difficulty level. The structures should be graded according to their relative difficulty from the point of view of their similarity with the student's mother tongue. Easy pattern should be taught first and then the difficult ones. Therefore, the structure should be graded from the point of view of their difficulty level. So these were the gradation of structures. Next is principles of structural approach. What are the different principles? Number one, importance of speech. In the learning of a language, speech is more important than the reading and writing. The reason being that language is learned orally first, then Speech becomes the basis for acquiring other skills like reading and writing. And in structural approach, speech is given more importance. Formation of language habits. Structural approach takes care of the fact that learning of a language is a habit formation process. The students are given a lot of drill and practice in learning, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And when language is based on the principle of habit formation, everything becomes natural with the language learners. Number 3, priority to the students' activities. In structural approach, the students' activities are given more importance than the teacher's activity. The structural approach takes care of the fact that both the teacher and the students are actively involved in the teaching learning process. Next point, mastery of structures. In structural approach, the emphasis is laid on the mastery of the structures. One structure is taken up at a time as the teaching point, and enough practice is given to the students till they get mastery over it, and then the next structure is taken up. Next, meaningful situations. In structural approach, meaningful situations are created by the teacher. That makes the teacher's work very interesting. These situations are created by the teacher with their facial expressions, with their gestures, by dramatization, and by other actions. In fact, the resourceful teacher faces no difficulty in creating the situations. He creates different kinds of situations for students' learning. Teaching one item at a time. In structural approach, only one item is taken up at a time and taught to the students. And in this way, students are able to grasp it well. And a new structure is taken up only when the first structure is mastered by the students. So these were the principles of structural approach. Next is advantages. Advantages of structural approach. Number 1, it facilitates the learning of English language by imparting the knowledge of its structures. The learning of the language is done by the knowledge of structures, by studying different structures of English language. The focus on sentence pattern and a lot of practice is given to the students. Student will learn a language before read or write it. And by learning the structure of sentences, the learner automatically learns some grammar, word order, and use of words. And the common errors can be avoided in grammar and composition while teaching through structural approach. Next point, it enables learner to speak the language first and teaches all the 4 skills of language learning: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And this approach, it is based on the scientific principles. Students are learning speech first. At every stage, the objective is clearly defined to the students. Habit of speaking English is developed right from the beginning among the students, and drilling helps in the removal of hesitation among the students. The students remain active throughout the teaching learning process in this approach, and the learners are able to retain the subject matter in their minds for a longer time because they learn through the situations. The different situations are created by the teacher in the classroom. Therefore, they are able to retain the studied material, the subject matter in their minds for a long, long time. And it helps the students to have good pronunciation because his mistakes are immediately corrected by the teacher. Even the slow learners, they are also benefited from it. And it makes the students creative learners. They are able to think themselves a large number of sentences of similar types as they have learned. So it increased their creativity among the students. So these were some of the advantages of structural approach. Next is disadvantages. Number one, it is a time-consuming approach of teaching English language. The process is very time-consuming because our syllabus are very bulky and both the students and the teacher wish to complete it in the stipulated time. This leaves no time for practicing structures, and it consumed a lot of time of the students as well as of the teachers. Mechanical drilling. The drill work done is not always interesting and it does not always lead to the habit formation. Sometimes it is mechanical and very dull. Reading, writing, and vocabulary expansion are neglected in structural approach. Too much emphasis on oral work, it wastes a lot of time of the students and it leads to the neglect of reading, writing, and also vocabulary expansion. Textbooks are not written according to the structures. Our textbooks, these are not written according to the structures. Even the books that are published by the NCERT, nowadays, they do not give out the list of structures to be taught. They do say that knowledge of 275 structures and 3000 words for vocabulary are to be taught to the students. And the teacher finds it difficult to identify these structures. Number next, difficulty to practice in overcrowded classes. Structural approach cannot be adopted in Indian schools because our classrooms are overcrowded and many times teachers are overburdened with extra work. And since structural approach requires much of the oral and drill work, which could be possible only in a small sized classroom, is not fruitful in overcrowded classes. Number next, suitable only to lower classes. This approach suits to lower classes only. In higher classes, the students dislike repetition of structures through monotonous drills. They will not like the repetition of structures again and again. Number next, suitable and competent teachers are not available. Stable and competent teachers who are capable enough to teach through the structural approach, these are not available in India. And the rigid sequencing makes the content uninteresting. The rigid sequencing of structures, this sometimes makes the content uninteresting and the students' interest vanishes because of it. So it is always a requirement that teaching material should be properly selected and graded to make the teaching and learning of structures interesting. Number last, importance of content. In structural approach, the center of interest is the material that is being taught to the students, not the child, not the student. Thus, the approach ignores the learners. It is not possible to create desirable, real situations for each and every student to learn according to their own capacity. And the book writers, they should have a very good knowledge of the nature of the language and how it is acquired. So books should be written in such a way that learner finds it easy to learn English as a second language. So that's all for today. Next, we will discuss in our next session. Till then, thank you very much. Thanks for watching.